All right, welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're looking at a truly wild story. I mean, how does a simple afternoon bike ride spiral into a national news headline involving millions of dollars, military deployments, and microscopic algae? It's a perfect storm of public infrastructure colliding with massive political and public debate. We're going to break down the facts, the science, and the big money behind this rapidly unfolding situation right in the heart of Washington, D.C. So let's just get right into it.
Okay, let's dive into this. The central mystery that kicked off this whole firestorm is this. David Hearn, a 67-year-old retired athlete, suddenly finds himself detained at one of our nation's most famous monuments. And Hearn isn't just your average weekend cyclist, right? He's a 3-time Olympian and a 2-time whitewater racing world champion. So you gotta wonder, how does a highly accomplished retiree, just out for a ride, end up in handcuffs right next to the Lincoln Memorial reflecting pool? Well, to understand that, we need to retrace exactly how his Friday afternoon went down.
So, Hearn was out on a pretty extensive 52-mile bike ride. After finishing up a loop at Haynes Point, around mile 50, he decides to swing by the Lincoln Memorial to check out the newly refurbished reflecting pool. According to Hearn, he gets there and spots a piece of the pool's brand new blue surface liner partially detached. It's just kind of flapping in the water. Naturally curious, he reaches in to see what it feels like, and then bam! Almost immediately after touching the material, he is detained by U.S. Park Police and actually charged with a misdemeanor for destruction of government property, literally going from a casual sightseeing stop to a police encounter in seconds.
Now, Hearn firmly disputes that charge. His defense pushes back hard against a narrative that was spreading like wildfire online. See, a viral video filmed by conservative journalist Emily Miller had been making the rounds on social media, where she alleged that Hearn actually grabbed a cleaning hose being used by National Park Service workers. Hearn completely flatly refutes this. He states he only touched an already peeling piece of the liner and didn't remove a single thing. But, regardless of his actual intent, the response from law enforcement was incredibly swift and honestly pretty severe.
Because he wasn't just handed a quick citation and sent on its way. Hearn was held in custody for almost 5 whole hours before finally being released with a court date. Now, on the surface, that level of response just for touching a detached pool liner might seem extreme. Why were tensions running so incredibly high at the reflecting pool that day? Well, to understand the sheer gravity of the situation and the intense scrutiny on this specific site, we have to zoom out and look at the actual project itself. Now, what's really interesting here is this massive number, $14 million. That is the price tag of the Trump administration's recent beautification project for the reflecting pool, which was pushed forward to get everything ready for the upcoming America 250 celebrations. This wasn't just some standard, everyday patch job. We are talking about a high-profile, extremely expensive executive priority aimed at making the Capitol look absolutely immaculate. And obviously, when you attach a $14 million expectation to a public monument, the pressure to keep it looking perfect is just immense.
But there is a stark contrast between what was intended and the current reality. The administration was aiming for this pristine, freshly painted American flag blue surface to perfectly reflect the surrounding monuments. Instead, just days after it was completed, visitors like David Hearn walked up to a very different scene. It was a visibly green, algae-filled basin with literal chunks of that expensive blue surface liner peeling up, completely exposing the rocky bottom underneath. As you can imagine, the visual difference between a multi-million-dollar investment and a deteriorating pool sparked some immediate tough questions.
So why exactly did the pool turn green so fast? Well, according to water systems experts like John Wilson Jr. and engineer Tyler Daly, this biological reaction is completely expected. You see, reflecting pools aren't designed like your typical backyard swimming pool. They completely lack standard filtration and sanitation systems. So when you pump a massive amount of fresh water into a huge, stagnant, unchlorinated basin and just leave it baking under the sun, rapid algae blooms are almost inevitable. The scientific consensus here is that this green phase is just a normal, if definitely unsightly, part of the startup process.
However, President Donald Trump offered a very different explanation for what was happening. In a post on Truth Social, the president attributed the peeling liner and the poor state of the water to intentional sabotage. He stated that unknown individuals have been causing, quote, real problems with vandalism, claiming that people have done everything possible to hurt the inside surface that was just installed. This completely reframes the entire issue. It shifts it from being an expected biological and engineering hurdle right into the territory of an active crime scene. Building on that perspective, the president also alleged that chemical agents were used to sabotage the water itself. He drew a direct comparison to a separate, recent incident on the National Mall where the numbers 8647 were actually found etched into some discolored grass nearby, which, by the way, authorities are actively investigating. So by linking the green algae and the peeling paint to a coordinated effort to destroy and demean, the administration fundamentally changed how this site was being guarded and managed day to day.
And the immediate result of those vandalism claims was a pretty dramatic escalation: the deployment of the National Guard. Photographs from the site started showing Guard personnel in full camouflage uniforms, patrolling the steps and the walkways right around the pool. They were literally standing watch while National Park Service workers were out there using hoses and vacuums to try and manage the algae. So what initially began as a pretty standard public works cleanup officially morphed into a highly secured operation with a very visible military presence.
The intense focus on perceived detractors didn't just stop with tourists either. The administration began heavily scrutinizing the media and public critics as well. For instance, President Trump specifically called out ABC News reporter Jonathan Karl, accusing him of trying to rip the rubber off the surface. Now, Karl was filmed merely touching the already peeling paint to demonstrate the issue to his viewers. The president even posted a photo of someone wearing a Team Algae shirt to further highlight his point about public hostility toward the project. It really just shows how deeply politicized the literal surface of this pool has become.
And this brilliantly illustrates why there is so much media and public scrutiny surrounding the site right now. Let's look at the financial mechanics behind the project. Both of the major contractors involved here, Atlantic Industrial Coatings, who applied the blue surface, and Green Water Services, who installed the water purification system, were awarded massive no-bid contracts. That means there was no competitive bidding process. When millions of taxpayer dollars are awarded that way, and the project almost immediately shows signs of failing, public and journalistic oversight is naturally going to kick into overdrive.
Taking a closer look at that purification contract specifically, the background of Green Water Services adds a whole other layer of controversy. The company that was awarded the no-bid contract to handle the pool's water quality is actually owned by the J.J. Cafaro Trust. And John J. Cafaro is a figure who, back in 2001, pleaded guilty to bribing a congressman. For a lot of folks in the public and the press, discovering that a company tied to a past bribery conviction received a no-bid contract for a purification system that seemingly failed to stop a massive algae bloom, well, it raises some immediate red flags.
Because of all these factors compounding, we are seeing some significant public backlash. In widely shared legal and political discussions online, a lot of people are questioning the actual physics of the administration's vandalism claims. As one user pointed out, a properly applied $14 million industrial coating shouldn't be something that a 67-year-old cyclist, or an ABC reporter for that matter, could just peel up with their bare hands. The argument here is that if the material is failing this easily, it points to poor workmanship rather than coordinated sabotage.
Which brings us right back to David Hearn. This macro-level political frustration is completely boiling over into this micro-level incident. A large portion of the public sentiment argues that prosecuting a retiree for touching a piece of public infrastructure that was already failing is just a frivolous waste of resources designed to deflect blame for the project's physical shortcomings. It perfectly connects this grand political theater right back to the individual citizen caught in the middle.
So, we are left to look at the big picture here. From expected algae blooms and no-bid contracts to military patrols and a handcuffed Olympian, this story is a literal masterclass in how quickly things can escalate. It really forces us to ask, where is the balance between protecting our cherished national monuments and managing the messy, biological, and financial realities of massive public engineering projects? When taxpayer money, political optics, and the natural environment collide like this, who is ultimately responsible for the fallout? Definitely something to think about the next time you visit a public landmark. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll see you next time.